Hello, and welcome to Cyber Risk Management in Practice. In this video, we're stepping into something that touches every organization, whether it's obvious or not: third-party risk management. Now that we've established a solid foundation for our cyber risk management program, something we can build upon, it's time to expand that foundation and focus on third-party risk management. The principles and practices we've covered so far are the bedrock upon which we can layer additional elements, like third-party risk management. Earlier in the book, I touched on some aspects of it. However, I deliberately held back from going too deep at that point. I wanted us to concentrate on setting up a strong and effective risk management framework first. You see, third-party risk management is a huge task on its own. It comes with its own set of challenges, and if we had jumped into it too early, we might have risked losing sight of the foundational principles that are essential for any risk management program. Now that you're prepared with a solid understanding of the core concepts and practices, we can take a deeper dive into third-party risks. When people hear third parties, they often think of IT vendors, but the reality is much broader. Third parties include service providers, software platforms, hardware suppliers, outsourced operations, cloud environments, payroll systems, consultants, logistics partners, even AI providers. These are the people, systems, and companies that plug directly into your business, and every one of them brings risk with them. Some of those risks are easy to spot, like when a vendor holds sensitive data or has privileged access to your network. Others are more subtle, like when a vendor relies on another vendor you didn't know about, or when a non-technical supplier causes disruption through operational failure or miscommunication. That's what makes third-party risks so important and so difficult. It's not just about direct exposure, it's about the ripple effects. A single weak link in the supply chain can lead to major financial loss, regulatory trouble, reputational damage, or operational breakdown. And we've seen it happen through real-world breaches, supply chain compromises, and business email attacks that started with trusted partners. That's why third-party risk management isn't just a procurement function or a checklist for compliance. It's a key part of cyber risk management and of overall organizational resilience. When we talk about third-party risk, it's easy to think of it as something abstract, an operational concern, or a compliance requirement. But attackers don't see it that way. They see it as an opportunity. And that's why supply chain attacks have become one of the most effective strategies for threat actors today. Let's start with one of the most well-known examples: the SolarWinds compromise. This wasn't just a breach of one company. It was a compromise of trusted software used by thousands of organizations, including government agencies and major enterprises. The attackers inserted malicious code into a legitimate software update. That update was signed, distributed, and installed just like any other. Except this time, it became a backdoor. It's the perfect example of why trust, without visibility, is dangerous. But that's just one type of attack. There are many others, each one targeting a different point in the third-party ecosystem. For example, compromised credentials. Attackers gain access to one vendor's systems, then pivot into their clients' environments. Phishing and social engineering. Third parties are often targeted because they may not have the same level of awareness or controls. Watering hole attacks. A trusted vendor's website or tool is compromised, waiting for you to access it. Hardware manipulation. In some industries, attackers target firmware or supply chain logistics to install compromised components. Business email compromise. Attackers impersonate a vendor, send fake invoices, or redirect payments by spoofing trusted identities. What do all of these tactics have in common? They exploit the trust we place in others, trust that hasn't always been verified, or that's granted too broadly. And because these attacks often come through trusted relationships, they're harder to detect and even harder to stop. That's why visibility and layered defense matter. You need to know who your third parties are, what they have access to, what data they handle, and how they're connected, both technically and operationally. Not every third-party risk comes from a high-profile breach or a well-coordinated cyber attack. Some of the most serious risks come from what you don't know is happening inside your own environment. Let's talk about a few of those hidden challenges. Vendor sprawl. Over time, it's easy for the number of vendors to grow, especially in large or fast moving organizations. A department needs a quick solution. Someone brings in a tool, and suddenly you've added another third party without centralized review, security assessment, or contract controls. This kind of vendor sprawl leads to poor visibility. You don't know who's handling your data, where it's going, or what kind of access you've given away. And without visibility, there's no effective risk management. Shadow IT, closely related as shadow IT, when teams or individuals onboard vendors or systems without going through the proper channels. They might not do it maliciously. They might just want to move fast, solve a problem, or try something new. But the result is the same. Tools and providers get plugged into your environment without security reviews, without contracts, and without any clarity on how they'll be monitored or offboarded later. And attackers love that. Shadow IT creates blind spots, and blind spots create opportunity. Missing risk reviews. Even when vendors are known, not all organizations have a process in place to assess them properly. Some rely on basic questionnaires or skip assessments entirely for low-risk vendors. Others don't revisit third-party risk unless something goes wrong. But risk isn't static. A vendor that started as low risk might become critical over time, especially if they start handling more data, more access, or become deeply embedded in your workflows. So what's the fix? You need more than tools or policies. You need internal collaboration. This is where security teams need to build strong relationships with procurement, finance, legal, and IT. Without those partnerships, risk management becomes reactive. With them, it becomes part of how the business operates. Managing third party risk is more than just a technical job, it's a team sport. No single function has enough visibility or authority to manage these risks alone, which means building strong, cross functional partnerships is critical. Let's talk about the players. Supply management and procurement. They're often the first to engage with vendors. If you're not working closely with them, vendors can be onboarded without any risk lens applied. No questionnaires, no control reviews, no contract requirements. Your relationship with procurement should be structured and consistent. You want shared intake processes, mutual visibility, and alignment on what kind of vendors need to be flagged for review. Legal and compliance. Contracts are where many of your risk controls live. That includes right to audit clauses, breach notification terms, privacy obligations, and security requirements. Legal can help ensure that risk related clauses are built into every agreement, not just for high risk vendors, but proportionally based on the level of access or criticality. Compliance and privacy teams are essential too, especially when data crosses jurisdictions or involves regulated activities. IT and architecture. IT understands how vendors actually connect to your systems. They know where integrations happen, what data flows are exposed, and how to configure access controls. Their input is vital for risk scoping, technical due diligence, and implementation. And in more complex environments, enterprise architects play a big role, especially when evaluating long-term vendor fit and how third parties align with transformation efforts. Risk, privacy, and security. Of course, risk and security teams are responsible for building the program, providing the tools, and ensuring decisions are documented and communicated. But they can't operate in a silo. Their job is to enable the organization to manage third party risk, not to own every piece of it themselves. To help structure these partnerships, you can lean on ISO 27036, a standard focused specifically on information security for supplier relationships. It outlines how to identify third party dependencies, assess them based on risk levels, define protection needs, and assign responsibilities across the lifecycle. It also reinforces the idea that supplier relationships are risk bearing relationships and must be treated with the same care and discipline as any internal control. This framework doesn't replace your program, it helps guide it, especially in organizations that need structure but aren't starting from scratch. And finally, one of the best ways to make this all work is through vendor segmentation. Not every third party needs the same level of scrutiny. Segment vendors based on access, criticality, data sensitivity, and integration level. That allows you to scale your program without overwhelming your resources. So, our third party risk management program can be structured around three main processes: due diligence, assurance, and offboarding. When it comes to managing third party risk, due diligence is where it all begins. This is your chance to understand who you're working with, how they operate, and whether they can meet your expectations, not just in performance, but in security, privacy, and accountability. And it's more than sending out a questionnaire. What are you really evaluating? During due diligence, you want to look at what kind of data the vendor will handle, what systems they'll integrate with, and how much operational dependency you're creating. Will they process sensitive data? Do they require privileged access? Will they host services that are customer facing or part of a critical workflow? Are they outsourcing to other providers, creating fourth party exposure? Understanding these elements early helps you define how much scrutiny is needed and where to set boundaries before the relationship begins. Tools and methods. There's no one way to do due diligence, but there are several tools you can use in combination. Security questionnaires help capture controls, policies, and maturity. Interview sessions give context that a form can't. Third-party risk platforms can help scale your assessments across multiple vendors. Certifications and attestations like ISO 27001 or SOC 2 can offer insight, but they're not substitutes for actual analysis. Whatever method you choose, the key is to make it repeatable, scalable, and risk aligned. Security clauses and contracts. This is also the moment to set expectations in writing. Strong due diligence includes reviewing and negotiating contracts to ensure the right security clauses are in place. That includes data protection and confidentiality terms, breach notification timelines, right to audit, subcontractor management and approval, minimum control requirements, obligations if the vendor is acquired, merges, or changes service scope, clarity on data ownership, retention, and return. These aren't legal details to be added at the last minute. They are risk treatment decisions, and they shape what happens if things go wrong. Setting the tone. What you do during due diligence sets the tone for the entire relationship. If you treat it like a formality, vendors will too. If you approach it as a structured, professional exchange with clear expectations and shared goals, you're far more likely to get cooperation and accountability later. Next, we'll move into the assurance phase. Once a vendor is onboarded, risk management doesn't stop. Assurance is about maintaining visibility and trust over time, making sure vendors continue to meet their obligations, protect your data, and operate within acceptable risk boundaries. What are you assuring? You're assuring that the controls they claimed during onboarding are still in place. Their security posture hasn't degraded. They're meeting performance and service expectations, and that any issues are caught and addressed early before they escalate. This isn't about micromanaging vendors. It's about structured oversight, focused on what matters most. How do you do it? There are several ways to approach assurance. Security ratings platforms can provide high-level signals around a vendor's external posture. Updated assessments, annually or based on changes in scope, can uncover gaps. Attestations or compliance reports like SOC 2, ISO 27001, or industry-specific standards can offer supporting evidence. Performance metrics and SLs should be tracked and reviewed regularly. Some organizations even conduct on-site audits or remote reviews, especially for critical vendors. The key is to align the level of assurance with the level of risk. You don't need to treat every vendor the same, but you do need to know who deserves more attention and why. Incident response and vendor-related events. Assurance also includes being ready for when something goes wrong. That means your incident response process must include third parties. Do you know how to contact them in a crisis? Are roles and escalation paths documented? Have you practiced scenarios where the incident started with a vendor, not inside your own walls? Because when the clock is ticking, you don't want to be figuring that out for the first time. And don't forget, vendor-caused incidents still affect your business. You're responsible for the response, the communications, and the recovery, whether the breach started with you or not. That's why it's so important to ensure vendors are part of tabletop exercises or simulation planning. You've included breach reporting obligations and timelines in their contracts. You have visibility into how their incident response plans work and how yours connects to theirs. Continuous alignment. Assurance isn't just about avoiding surprises. It's about keeping the relationship healthy. That means regular communication, check-ins, and a shared understanding of goals. If their environment changes, or yours does, the risk picture shifts, and you need a way to realign expectations quickly. Eventually, every third-party relationship ends. Maybe the contract expires. Maybe the service no longer fits your needs. Maybe the risk becomes too high. Whatever the reason, how you offboard a vendor matters just as much as how you brought them in. Because this is the moment when access must be revoked, data must be accounted for, and responsibilities must be clearly closed out. Planning for the end, from the start, offboarding isn't just something that happens at the end of a contract. It should be planned during onboarding. That means asking, how will we recover or delete data? Who owns the decommissioning of accounts, services, or integrations? What happens to backup copies, logs, or cached files? Will equipment be returned, destroyed, or reassigned? These aren't just IT questions. They're risk decisions, and they should be reflected in your vendor management policies and contract terms. The offboarding process. A strong offboarding process includes inventorying access, accounts, API keys, VPN credentials, shared portals, anything the vendor can still touch, revoking permissions immediately and completely, confirming data return or destruction, with logs or attestations if needed, decommissioning systems, especially if the vendor provided hosted services, documenting the offboarding so you can show it was done, how it was done, and what was left in place. Involve the right people. Security and IT need to work closely with procurement, legal, and business owners. Sometimes vendors are embedded deeper than expected, and it's not always obvious what needs to be disconnected. And communication is key. Both internally and with the vendor, you want to set expectations, assign responsibilities, and make sure the process is smooth, not rushed or improvised. Why it matters. Poor offboarding leads to lingering access, forgotten data, untracked risk, and frustrated teams. It also opens the door for compliance issues and future breaches. Done right, offboarding is a clean, controlled transition. It protects the organization, closes the loop, and reinforces your overall cyber risk maturity. And it shows that third-party risk management isn't an isolated process. It must be integrated with your cyber risk management program, but with its own sub-processes and assigned resources. It's something you lead with intention from start to finish. If this approach resonates with you, there's a lot more discussed in the book. Find your copy and embark on this journey with me, improving your cyber risk management program step by step with a practical approach.